afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing, and happy Saturday afternoon to everyone. Hope y'all are having a great weekend. Been a pretty good one for yours truly. And welcome to another installment and Ambassador's Birthday Bash Reviews. And today we are continuing our reviews of the Kevin Smith's View Askew universe films. And today, I might be going to hell for this one. Maybe just a little bit to hell, maybe purgatory at the most. Today, we are, of course, discussing Dogma. And before we jump into the review, I do want to say hello to everybody. Hope you all enjoy the discussion. And if this is your first visit to the Ambassador, I hope you enjoy your time here. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button. Join this community where we discuss, we debate, we celebrate pop culture and cinema and TV and streaming and all those things that take our minds off the humdrum day to day. And this is going to, like I said, I might go to purgatory for this review. Because today we are discussing one of, honestly, okay, this is by far all of Kevin Smith's films that he did in the 90s and going into the early 2000s. This by far is one of my favorites. And you might be asking yourself, Ambassador, why? Because, well, for one thing, it's well written, it's well acted, it's extremely funny, and, well, yes, this movie has a shit demon in it. Words I never thought I would ever say on this channel, but yes, this movie has, well, as the link said, and oh, by the way, the link to the stream is in the chat. So if you want to join me and discuss, share your thoughts on the film Dogma, links is in the chat. So let's, without any further ado, let's jump in. This, again, was one of those films I did not get a chance to see in theaters. This was one I got on home video back in the day, back when you could go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or Family Video and pull it off the shelf and go take it home and watch it and consign your soul to the abyss. Okay, full transparency for those of you who don't know or may not know me. I am a Christian. I am a very devout Christian. I am going to be going through the process to be joining the Catholic Church. And yet, yes, I do enjoy this film. Yes, I do acknowledge that it is to some degrees blasphemous. Maybe not blasphemous, but is a touch heretical. But as one of my professors in seminary said, if you're not being just a little bit heretical when you're talking about your faith, you're not doing it right. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat, Fook Norris and Sith Care Bear, Josh. Fook, it's good to see you. Sith Care Bear, it's been a little bit. So good to see you, and thank you both very much. So, and thank you all for stopping in. And like I said, hope you enjoy the stream. And if you want to join me, links there in the chat. Anyhow, yes, I do acknowledge that this movie is a bit blasphemous and maybe a bit heretical. I get that. But as Kevin Smith said in his disclaimer before this movie, Fook, I figured. As Kevin Smith said in the disclaimer before this movie even started, he put a disclaimer. Disclaimer: a means by which by one covers their own ass. Well, he covers his ass, and he says, "Look, before you all go out and start rioting and doing something stupid and chewing people out, just remember, it's just a movie. It's just a movie." And then he says, "Also remember that the good Lord does have a sense of humor. Look at the duck-billed platypus." Said Josh, that's okay. Not a worry. And I hope you enjoy your time with your daughter today. So no worries. And no need for a sad face. No reason to be sad. More important to spend time with your family. That's what I did yesterday. Everything got to Funny is funny. I bet God would agree. Foog, yeah. I mean, also, well, to quote a late and very hilarious comedian, one Mr. Robin Williams, what divine creator would put a waste disposal unit next to a recreational center? And of course, he was referring to the referring both to the male and the male um, digestive system and reproductive system. So yes, the good Lord, I think, does to a degree have a sense of humor. Well, God Himself and even Christ Himself has a sense of humor. As I asked a pastor once, did Jesus have a sense of humor? And he said, well, yes, Christ had a sense of humor. Here's a line of scripture. How does one pass a camel through the eye of a needle? You can't pass a camel through the eye of a needle. It's impossible. So just a little bit of um Christian humor from the Lord from the mouth of the Lord Himself. But jumping right into this film, this I think is one of the best structured films that Kevin Smith ever did. I think it has some of the most interesting characters. And to the chat, George, good to see you. Just about somebody say hi, doing my own stream in a half hour. I only saw Dogma once, but I enjoyed it. As a Catholic myself, I was not offended by it. Well, as a Christian and as a, well, not soon to be, but as one who's going to becoming Catholic, I can say this. No, I am not offended by this film by any degree. Although I can, I will say this. I can understand where some people who are very strong in their Christian belief and in their faith might be potentially offended by this, but at the same time, I'm not. And I know that there probably aren't. I mean, y'all are in here, you're listening to me discuss this. But as I was saying, I think this is by far one of the best well put together films that Kevin Smith has done. I think, okay, you've got a great cast, and let's go over the cast. You got Ben Affleck, you got Matt Damon coming off of Good Will Hunting as Bartleby and Loki. You've got Linda Ferrantino, who was kind of the it girl for a while there in like the early to mid 90s as Bethany. You, of course, have, may he rest in peace, the late, great Alan Rickman as the Metatron, the voice of the Almighty, like quite literally. You've got Jason Lee as Azrael, a demon who got cast out of heaven because he refused to fight in the war between Lucifer and God. What a pansy ass. You, of course, have got one of my all-time favorite comedians, and that is, of course, Chris Rock as Rufus, the 13th apostle who was excluded from the Bible because he was black. Something I do not agree with. And of course, you have Selma Hayek as Persephone, a muse who turns into who gets a body and becomes a stripper. And of course, you've got those two lovable and mischievous miscreants. You know them, you love them, we love them. The prophets, Jay and Silent Bob, portrayed by Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes, of course. And of course, you have a cameo by a comedian who I have a great deal of respect for. I don't particularly agree with her social political views, but I look at her for her talent as a comedian and as an actress. And of course, that is Janine Garofalo. Granted, she only has one scene in the whole film, but it's a really good scene. But this for me, the first time I watched this movie, I was like, okay, interesting concept. Christ had a niece, but for Christ to have a niece, he would have had to have brothers and sisters. But according to scripture or particular interpretations of scripture, Christ had no brothers or sisters. Now, according to the Catholic Church, Christ had no brothers or sisters. Jesus and Mary, or Joseph and Mary, had no other children. Now, from a Protestant perspective, I can say this. No, Mary did not feel the touch of a man when she conceived Christ. We understand this. For those of us that are devout Christians who accept this as fact. But there is the contentious point. Granted, the contention is varied that Joseph and Mary did have children, because Scripture does refer to certain individuals as Jesus's brothers. Now, we have no reference to sisters, but the argument could be made. But in this film, we have Bethany, the great grandniece of Jesus Christ. And of course, the whole thrust of this film is because one particular demon has a grudge against the Almighty because he got. That will be tomorrow afternoon, George. I think I scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. So, and George, you have a good stream too, buddy. You will talk to you later. But yeah, this film presents a lot of, I think, semi-controversial concepts when it comes to Christian belief, Christian dogma, Catholic dogma, Protestant dogma, even on various levels. But I think, okay, getting back to the main thrust of the film, you have one particular demon who still has a gripe against the Almighty because he got kicked out of heaven. And that, of course, is Azrael, played by Jason Lee. And I think played very well by Jason Lee. And what does he do? He waits for a church to celebrate its rededication. And he sends two renegade angels, Bartleby and Loki, played by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. He sends them a little article and says, hey, you can get back into heaven now. And thus, once you do that, you can prove God that he was wrong. Wrong that he kicked you all out. Yeah, you can't prove God wrong. Also, this presents a very interesting argument that the good Lord takes on a physical body once a month and goes to play skee ball in New Jersey. But my thoughts on this film. And to the chat, PLK Entertainment, thank you very much, bud. I do appreciate it. And PLK, it's been a few minutes since I've seen you last and everything. And I hope you're doing well. I hope you are doing well also. So, and thank you for stopping by. But to kind of, we'll put the whole discussion about what this movie is, some of the rules it's bending in terms of Christian belief aside for the time being. We'll discuss the film just itself. The idea of two angels getting back into heaven and negating all of existence because one little demon has a beef against the Almighty. Interesting concept. Very, very interesting concept. And I think the way Kevin Smith tackled this film, he himself being Catholic, I imagine he probably got a lot of flack from family and friends alike. But it's to say this movie tickles my funny bone is an understatement. Because when you've got so many great comedic actors and actresses in this film. I love skateboarding, and Lee was actually a pro for a short time, so I've been a fan for a while. Fook, that's cool. Really cool, bud. But it's... What do I want to say about this film? I love it. I absolutely, positively love this film. It makes me laugh, it makes me think, and it even challenges me on certain levels. It challenges me theologically, it challenges me on my beliefs, on certain ideas that I hold. Now, to the film itself, the concept is, I think, sound. I think the idea of having a story where you've got two angels who have been kicked out since the plagues because one of them, they were both friends. You have Loki, who is the angel of death, and his best friend Bartleby, who is a Gregorian watcher, says, "Hey, do you really think it's okay to kill in God's name when these people potentially haven't really done anything wrong?" And Loki goes to God, very inebriated, as told by Metatron, tells him he quits, throws down his fiery sword, and gives the Lord the finger. And as Metatron also explains, in the old days, the Lord was vengeful and hot tempered. Interesting description, but I don't think entirely inaccurate. Well, okay. It could be argued from what we have in the Old Testament that God could be portrayed as vengeful and hot tempered, but I don't think in the particular instances where we see God's wrath being exercised as unwarranted. I mean, if you look at the plagues, yeah, Pharaoh wouldn't let the Israelites go, and God was like, "Okay, I'm going to have to punish you until you get the point." And unfortunately, that last plague. But to put I will say this briefly. We as Christians understand God was wrathful and is still, but he is holding his wrath for now. God does what he does as portrayed in the Bible. And yes, I do believe that the Bible is historically accurate. I do believe that every word is not without the room for debate and interpretation. But I will say this: God took no joy, God took no pleasure in punishing the people of Egypt. All the plagues, including the 10th one, were not something done because God enjoyed doing it, but because it had to be done because there was no other way, unfortunately. And to see an angel having to deal with that sort of emotional baggage is an interesting idea. I mean, we don't have a clear picture of what angels actually are except from the little bit that we have in the Bible. So we don't really know if they have a conscience. We don't really know if they have any type of will of their own per se. They are a creation of the Almighty to exercise his will. And one particular angel bore all the wrath. He was the angel of death. And that is probably not an easy position to be in. I mean, it's like a person who is a state executioner who carries out death sentences for extremely violent criminals. And yeah, can I understand where Bartleby and Loki are coming from, particularly on Bartleby's perspective, that is it right to kill in God's name, even though it's God telling you do this? No, it's probably not easy. It's not easy to take a life, or many lives, even. But no, I don't think the Almighty took any pleasure in punishing the people of Egypt. I don't think the good Lord took any pleasure in flooding the world. I don't think the good Lord took any pleasure in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, even though the people that lived there were extremely wicked. All of the things that we see in the Old Testament, the plagues of Egypt, all the other acts that God carries out, where lives are lost, where destruction is wrought. No, I do not believe God takes any pleasure in it. And, I will say this, in terms of the portrayal of God, him or herself in this film, though I always go by the pronoun, and no, I'm not going to get into a whole thing about pronouns here. I'm just saying this for this particular um, discussion. Do I have a particular issue with God being portrayed both as male and female? No, I do not. Do I have an issue with Alanis Morissette portraying the female version of God? No, I don't. I actually find it somewhat humorous. And even though she never says a word, or he never says a word, because as Metatron, portrayed by Alan Rinkman, says, we had to go through 5 M's before we figured out that human beings, neither psychologically nor oral audioly, can handle the true nature of God's true voice. And it's why I'm here. Not me, the Metatron. Because as he tells Bethany, what was it he said to Bethany? Shoot. It was funny. Yeah. Metatron tells Bethany, we went through 5 hours before we figured out that human beings can't handle the nature of God's voice. Their heart explodes and the heart explodes inside their chest. Exactly what we see happen to Bartleby at the end of the film. So it's, but no, okay. That's why the male version of God doesn't say a word when he's attacked by the 3 deceased roller hockey players. Excuse me. But it's the whole idea of all of this whole situation being carried out by one little demon who has the beef against the Almighty. To say it bends absurdity is an understatement, because this is an awful lot to go after God, to unmake all of existence. And Azrael in this film, Azrael is kind of a prick. Okay, not kinda. He's a prick. He's a demon. As he says, I'm an effing demon. Yeah, and you got your ass kicked by it. Well, as Rufus said, a tubby mother effer in a in a trench coat. And as Jay says, you mean Silent Bob is an instrument of God? And Bethany's no, but Cardinal Glick is the kind of ass a-hole who would have his golf clubs blessed for a better game. And can we talk about Cardinal Glick for just a minute? Cardinal Glick, portrayed by, I think, one of the greatest comedians of all time. The late, the great, the absolutely awesome George Carlin. He only has 2 scenes in this whole, scene at the beginning of the movie at the church, scene with Bethany and Rufus and Jay and Silent Bob, and that's it. But in those 2 scenes, George Carlin absolutely owns it. I wish he had done more movies. I really do. I wish George Carlin had done more movies. The man was a genius and so incredibly insightful, and so absolutely, I will say it, absolutely ruthless with some of his comedy. But that's the nature of comedy. If it doesn't offend you, if it doesn't make you think, then it's not good comedy. its current late night talk show comedy, which stinks. There, I said it. But George Carlin comes out there and he's like, this as head of the Catholicism wow, as part of the Catholicism Wow campaign, we're going to be retiring. Yes, Josh. Yes. Carlin in the 90s was into the 2000s. I actually have a couple of his performances on CD. Complaints and Grievances and You Are All Diseased. Two of his very best. Absolute very best. But he comes out. And I will agree with some of the things that his character says. Christ didn't come to earth to give us the willies. He came to help us out. He was a booster. And it's with that in mind that we are unveiling a new sigil of our dear Lord. And what do we get? The Buddy Christ. The Buddy Christ. The first time I saw that statue, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. I honestly, at the time, I did not know how I felt about the Buddy Christ. But as I have watched this film, and I will say this, as I have been able to do a lot of dissection and interpretation and discussion about scripture, yes, I think while I don't agree with the whole design of the Buddy Christ, the concept itself is not a bad idea. It is. But Cardinal Glick is like, doesn't it just pop? Buddy Christ. And of course, what do we see? And I will be discussing, just to give y'all a little bit of an update. Later tonight, I will be back and I will be doing a review of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And what do we see on the dashboard of the Nun that pick up Jay and Silent Bob? A miniature Buddy Christ. So it did catch on. That's the kicker. It actually caught on. I mean, do I agree with the idea that Jesus Christ came to earth to help us out? Yes. Do I believe that Jesus Christ came to earth as the payment for the sins of humanity? Yes, I do. Do I believe Jesus Christ might have even had a sense of humor? Yes. Yes, I do. Because if he is like the Father and the Father is like him, I'm not going to get into a whole discussion on the Trinity. That would make even my brain hurt. Yes, I do believe the Lord had a sense of humor. But anyway, you toss all of this into a blender or into a big pot. You've got Bethany, the last scion, the last great grandniece of Jesus Christ. You've got Rufus, the 13th apostle, who was excluded from the Bible because he was black. You've got Persephone, who is a muse who came to Earth to make her way, but who's had decades upon decades of writer's block. You've got two renegade angels who are wanting to go home because they were kicked out and they felt unjustly by the Almighty. You've got a demon who's got a beef against the Almighty because he was kicked out of heaven. And then you have an angel, Bartleby, portrayed by Ben Affleck, who goes like, I just want to go home to, I'm going to go to war against God. And his best friend Loki's like, dude, what the hell? This is all about us just going home, and now you want to take on God? He's like, I've seen this before, and you know how it ended. You were there. Lucifer got his ass handed to you. Are you nuts? That for me, this whole scenario, the whole crux of this film for me, it is absurd but hilarious and yet thought provoking at the same time, because you have Bethany's journey through all this as well. because she herself has a bit of a beef with God because she was married. She was going to have a her and her husband were going to have a child. And then he decided he didn't want the kid. So she went and had a unfortunate botched abortion. And she lost the ability to have, and her asshole husband divorced her because she had his children because of what happened. And I have to say it. I hate Bethany's ex-husband. He's an asshole. And it's like everybody has a bit of a beef with one thing or another in relation to God. But Bethany comes around. Bethany, she's like, okay. And to the chat, Jedi Bill 797. Bill, it's good to see you. I am doing very well. How are you doing? Talking about Dogma this afternoon. The movie, not the concept. This Bethany's story, Bethany's journey in this movie, I think is extremely well played out. Now, the interesting thing that I discovered, and I finally was able to get, I once upon a time had a copy of this movie, but I, for some dumb reason, traded it in. Finally found a copy of it, thanks to my ambassador on eBay. And it's, there's some deleted scenes in this film that kind of flesh out everybody's story a little bit further, particularly Bethany. There's a particular scene or anything with Bethany where she's working at the women's clinic. And yeah, I think you all get when I know what I'm talking about when I say a women's clinic. And she's in there with a young woman and all. And the young woman's like, I don't know if I really want to be on birth control and all this and yada, yada, yada. And Bethany tells her story about how her and her husband got pregnant and they weren't ready to have a kid at the time. So Bethany went to a less than reputable, I don't like saying this word, it bothers me, but there's no other word for it. She goes to an abortionist. And unfortunately, the abortion, it works, but she ends up having complications from it, and it renders her sterile, unfortunately. And she tells the young woman, look, get the birth control pills. You might pack on some weight, but it'll all go to your chest, and it'll make you a god in the eyes of your boyfriend. And that really, hearing that whole story really makes you empathize more so. Bill, you can find it on eBay. That's where we found it. I think I paid like $20 or so for it and everything. If you go to Amazon, you're going to pay through the nose. So what would be my suggestion to you, Bill? If you're wanting a copy of Dogma, if you don't have it, check out eBay. That would be my recommendation to everybody. If you love this, if you're a fan of this movie, you love this movie, but you don't have a copy, check out eBay. It's what I did, and it worked. But when she's sitting in the Mexican restaurant with Metatron, and she's like, I was going to have a life. I was going to have a family with my husband. Isn't that plan good enough for God? And she's like, to hell with him. And Metatron's like, I beg your pardon. She's like, no. She's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go on this little pilgrimage of yours. And Metatron's like, look, I get it. You lost the ability to create life, but you get the opportunity to play mother to the whole world by protecting it and saving it from complete and total annihilation. And as we get to the third act, when Rufus reveals Bethany's background to her, the fact that she's a great great grandniece of Jesus, she runs off. She runs out into the middle of a lake. And I think that particular part of the film was a very nice analogy for um, the scene and the scene from the Gospels where Christ is alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's like, Lord, if Father, if this be your will, let this cup from me. This cup pass from me. And I think what Kevin Smith did in that particular scene was very well thought out, because it parallels this distant relation of Jesus with the Lord himself. And for me, at least, as a Christian, that is not a massive issue, because we do, as a Christian, I do understand the dual nature of Christ, divine but man, man as so far as he inhabited a corporeal body. Yeah. And hello to the chat, DJ Ryan G. Yeah, passing through Gethsemane. Yeah. That's weird, Bill. I'll tell you what, Bill. After the stream is over, I'll check eBay, and if I find a posting for you, I'll send it to you on Twitter. Because I was pretty sure I'd seen one not too long ago. But what Smith does with that particular scene in that film, or in Dogma, that parallels, so not exactly, but the pain and the heartache that Bethany is feeling, and not to mention the setting. They're out in the middle of the woods, they're near a lake. Now, granted, there wasn't a lake in Gethsemane that we're aware of anyway, but that loneliness, that isolation that Bethany feels, and that we can imagine the Lord himself felt, even though Peter, James, and John are right there in the... Sid, that's fine, bud, and appreciate you stopping in, and thank you very much. For those of you who don't know, my birthday was actually Wednesday, but I've, the last several days I've been doing these reviews and everything, and to kind of, just kind of commemorate my birthday. But Josh, you have a good time at the concert with your kiddo, and we'll see you next time. And of course, make sure you catch the replay and everything, and all like that. So you have a good one, bud. Appreciate you coming in today. But as I was saying, Smith, I think, very well you're welcome. He captures what we could possibly feel was the isolation and the foreboding for Christ there in Gethsemane. And for Bethany, she's not dealing with the same thing that Christ did, but she's dealing with her own struggles. She's coming to the realization that she is a distant relation of Christ. That's got to be no small thing or no easy thing for any person to come to terms with. And she reacts, I think, in a very real and I think a very understandable manner. I can relate, or okay, not relate, but I can empathize with Bethany. Because for those of you who know, and I've told this online, on air and off and everything, and I've talked with people about it for a long time since I've been online or had the channel. I was adopted. at birth, and I didn't find out I was adopted till I was in my 30s. And seeing the anger and and the just absolute brokenness of Bethany, I get that too. Okay, Bill. Alrighty, bud. So, but I think I think we to one degree or another can relate to Bethany in that moment where where Rufus explains her background, explains her family history, and it can be difficult. I mean, it was difficult for me to find out I was adopted for all my life. I understood that the people I called mom and dad, I called my grandparents, and I called my aunt and uncle, my cousins, everybody was my family. And then one split second, I found out, oh, wait a minute, you've got this whole other family out there. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat, Mr. Jack Beers. Jack, it's good to see you, bud. I appreciate you stopping in. So, but, people, I think at times give a lot, Kevin Smith, I think's a lot of undue grief. And but I think this movie had some of his best writing, honestly. I do. I think this movie, I mean, all of his movies I think are very well written, but with Dogma, you get the impression that he really poured a lot of himself into this movie. And you see Smith's skill as a writer and as a director in this film. I mean, let's be honest. This film, up, unt- up until now, a lot of his films were not low budget, but this film, I think, had a bigger budget than most. And I think it was partially for some of the cast members that he pulled on board, like Alan Rickman, like Selma Hayek, like Chris Rock, like George Carlin, and so on. Obviously, him and Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were all friends, and so on. But this had a big budget movie feel to it, and you can see it on the screen, and I think that's to be applauded. I know people have had their issues with Kevin Smith in the last few years, particularly with the whole controversy around. Okay, I'm not going to say controversy because to me, it's not controversial. People had issues with what they did with his Netflix series of Masters of the Universe. Now, I watched Masters of the Universe, and I, for one, had absolutely no issue with the way these characters were portrayed. I honestly felt that Masters of the Universe Revelations was superior to the 80s cartoon. The characters felt more real, the characters felt more fleshed out, the universe itself was more fleshed out. To me, I had no issues with Masters of the Universe Revelations. And the same is true here with Dogma. As I said, this movie challenged me on a theological level, and it made me really re-examine and reevaluate how I look at scripture. Now, do I find that it contradicts scripture? Not necessarily. Okay. I want to be very specific here and I want to state this very clearly. I think the ideas that Kevin Smith put forth in Dogma do have issues to varying degrees. Do I think that he was being deliberately heretical or blasphemous in this film? No, I do not. But what I think Dogma does do is it compels Christians, both Protestant and Catholic, to really examine why we believe what we believe. And in that, I do not find any fault. And I think that's what a good comedic film and a good film can do. And yes, I do believe Dogma is a good film. Really, I didn't hear about it, Jack. That's interesting. There was a protest at the premiere of this movie. Kevin actually joined the protest with a sign that said Dogma is dog crap. Heard about that on the news and it made me want to watch the film. Interesting. So I honestly was not aware of that. So, but for those of us who know, Kevin Smith is, I don't know if he's a practicing or if he's a lapsed Catholic, but he was raised in a very Catholic home. His mother and father are Catholic. He himself, like I said, I don't know if he's still practicing or not, or if he even attends mass or not. But for him to do a movie like this was gutsy. Do I think it's gutsier than the film that Mel Gibson did back in the early 2000s, The Passion of the Christ? No, but I still think it took a lot of balls. I think it took a lot of backbone, a lot of guts to tackle some of the ideas that Kevin Smith puts forth in this film. And that, like I said, is not a that is not a bad thing. Because good cinema, good films, good movies, whatever way you want to categorize it as, should challenge us. And these ideas of an angel killing in God's name is difficult for us to process because we have a mental image and a mental picture of who God is. Or at least we have a idea of who God is. And we would not ever want to believe that God, who made all things, made creation, made the world, made the universe, made the cosmos, made this world that we live in. If you believe in, if you hold to those beliefs, it's difficult to contemplate the idea that God would have an angel kill in his name. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat to an old friend, Jeff B. Jeff, is good to see you, pal. Appreciate you stopping by. So, um, now to something a little less heavy and everything. We might come back to some. I want to continue on with this train of thought. The idea that Joseph and Mary never had any other children, that Christ was their only child. It is something even when I was just a Protestant Christian, not one that's going to be joining the Catholic Church. It was a concept I did not have a problem with because it, as Rufus said so eloquently, to believe that a married man and woman never got down is just plain utter gullibility. I agree with that. Now, to put it in a more polite way to say that a married man and woman never had intercourse, never had children, and never had any children from said intercourse, I think is gullible. Yes, I think it is a bit gullible. Now, am I going to call my wife that? Am I going to call my mother-in-law that because they are both Catholic? No. And would I call myself gullible? No. Am I going to disrespect either one of those people? One being my wife, the other one being my mother-in-law? No, I'm not. Nor would I insult another Catholic that way. You hold to that belief. That is your prerogative to do so, and it is not my place to point a finger in your face and say you are an idiot for it. As most Catholics hold to the belief that Mary and Joseph never had any other children, and that Jesus had no brothers or sisters. That is their belief to hold to, and who am I to say they are wrong in it? And the idea of there being a great, 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 great grandniece of Jesus out there in the world somewhere, particularly for the context of this movie, no, I don't think it's too far-fetched. Because if you do consider the idea that Mary and Joseph did have children, and that Jesus did have brothers and sisters, and that those brothers and sisters married other people and had children themselves, then yeah, the idea does hold merit. Now, to the idea of can an angel or a demon prove God wrong? And that potentially being the reason for all of existence to be unmade? That is something that I do have a bit of an issue with, because we hold to this belief as Christians that God is infallible, that God is perfect, that God is without flaw or defect. So that everything that he says or does or commands is the right thing. Was God wrong in kicking Bartleby and Loki out of heaven because Loki refused most vehemently and rather crudely to be the angel of death any longer? Jeff, she had one of the best. She had one of the best roles in Dogma, and she was only on screen for all of 10 minutes, if that. But this whole idea of proving God wrong is absurd. God is not wrong. God is perfect. Yeah, that's true. All she does is poke Bethany's nose and goes, "What?" And that's it. Well, heck, Silent Bob has fewer lines than, or says more than God does in the whole movie. And he says, "No ticket." It's all Silent Bob. Well, actually, no. He says, "No ticket," and thanks. But yeah, the whole idea of a demon coming up with a scheme to try and have all of existence erased to prove God wrong, and that said demon was able to incapacitate God and leave him in a vegetative state on a ventilator. Yeah, that's a little far fetched, but for the context of the movie, it works. The idea that the Almighty comes to Earth once a month to play skee ball. Well, even the Lord's got to have a hobby. Just saying. But to kind of steer away from the more heavier aspects of this film and talk about something a little more, talk about something lighter. the banter between Jay and Silent Bob and Rufus has got to be some of the funniest stuff in this whole movie. Not to mention Jay and Silent Bob themselves coming to Bethany's rescue as she's leaving the women's clinic, and she's attacked by the Hellion triplets, which I think is their unofficial title. I don't know if they actually have a title for those three roller hockey boys who were dead who were under Azrael's command. And you hear Jay go, "Snooch to the mother freaking nooch," and they come in, the music swells, and it's like dun 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 dun, dun. And Jay and Silent Bob are kicking the ever loving crap out of those three boys. And go back to your paper boy, you mighty duck fox. And Bethy's like, "Who are you guys?" And oh, hi, my name's Jane. This is my hero life mate, Silent Bob. He's like, "I don't know who those guys were, but if it hadn't been for me, those three would have kicked Joe's and Lunchbox's asses if I had represented." And Silent Bob is like, "We will get to that, Jeff. We will get to that in just a minute." And for those of you that are in the chat, if you're anything, I know I say this, but for those of you that are coming in new, if you want to join me, I put the link in the stream where it says, "Holy bleep, it's a bleep demon." There's a link if you want to use it. But she's like, and then Bethany and Jane Silent Bob are in the diner, and she's eating English muffin with some jam or whatever. And then she's like, "I think I should go with you guys to New Jersey." And Jay's like, "If we aren't going to bleep, why the bleep did you invite us to the diner?" And she's like, "Somebody told me you would take me somewhere, and you would know where." And Jay's like, "What the hell are you talking about? I don't even know where I am half the time." And for me, that whole thing, and then when they finally agreed, and she's like, "I can pay." They're like, "Pay?" And Jay's like, "This is like, I'm Han Solo, you're Chewie, she's Ben Kenobi, and we're in that effed up bar." Another Star Wars reference in a Kevin Smith movie. Go figure. But of course, Bethany asks, "What are you all doing in McHenry, Illinois?" And he's like, "Well, we watch these movies by this," well, as Jay said, "this fuck named John. You ever heard of John Hughes?" He's like, "16 Candles, John Hughes?" He's like, "You know that guy? That effing guy?" He's like, and Jay's like, running down John Hughes, and my blood pressure is going through the roof. Like, how dare you insult one of the greatest directors of the 1980s? You little stoner. Do not say an unkind word about John Hughes. He's like, "Can't even watch 16 Candles anymore with this tubby bitch, because anytime the redhead gets her dream guy, he starts weeping like a bitch with a skin knee, and there's nothing worse than watching a fucking fat man weep." And Bob's like, I think Jason Mewes in this movie, he had some of his best lines, some of his best scenes. And okay, another great scene I absolutely love, when Bethany decides, she's like, "Nobody is going to fuck me. I'm going home." Excuse me. "Since I have decided to not go to New Jersey and go home, thank you so much and goodbye." And then you see it. I say this with no disrespect. I'm just describing it as it is. When you see Chris Rock's skinny naked ass fall into frame, and she's like, and Jay, he's like, "Do you think there's a message written on him like in Con Air? Do you see that flick?" And Rufus comes to. He's like, "Oh man, did that suck?" Jay's like, "Kill it, kill it." He's like, "Sounds about right." and and she's like, "The impact with which you hit the ground should have liquefied you." And Rufus is like, "Death is a problem for hemophiliacs, not for the gravity is an issue for the living and for necrophiliacs." No, damn it! How did he say it? The only worry of the dead is decay and necrophiliacs. And Jay's like, "Did you hear what he said?" He said, "He's like, I'm not undead. I'm dead. I died." He's like, "Basically, the secret to the resurrection. I never forgot it." And you knew Christ. I won't say how Pedro says it because I don't want to get myself in trouble here because I can't use that word. He's like, "Knew him? Hell, the guy owes me $50." If you've seen the movie, you know what word I replaced because, like I said, I can't say that word. Wouldn't be proper. Not gonna do it. Wouldn't be proper. And of course, Bethany is like, "You said your name was Rufus." He's like, "Yeah, it's usually Rufus is usually it's long Rufus, but it's a little cold out this morning. You understand." And he's like, "Hey, Big Papa, how about blowing me your coat?" And Jay's like, "Dude, his piece is gonna be rubbing inside your armor." He's like, "I'll do my best to tuck it back." And he's like, "We better start walking." And Jay's like, "Walking? Do you know how far we are from anywhere?" And he's like, "We when it was back in the day with JC, we walked everywhere. Did you hear of Fat Apostle?" Mm-mm. And Jay's like, "What the fuck is an apostle?" But anyway, yeah. This once Chris Rock enters this movie, the comedy factor gets elevated to 10. And of course, we've got the three dead roller hockey boys standing right behind him, and they report back to Azrael, and he's like, "So let me get this straight. Not only has the last Scion met the prophets, but she's there. The apostle is also with them." And then he says the line that we all, for those of us that have watched this movie before, he's like, "And since I can't even trust you to kill a woman, well, I am left with no alternative to reach out to employ outside help. You left me no choice. I've got to bring in the Golgothan." And the three roller hockey boys are like, "Oh crap!" And you're like, "What the hell is a Golgothan?" And then there's the whole conversation at movies, and to prove to Silent Bob that Jay isn't gay, they go to a strip joint. Because Rufus makes a comment. Jay's like, "Tell me something nobody else knows. You masturbate more than anybody on the planet." He's like, "Shit, everybody knows that. Tell me something nobody knows. When you're doing it, you think about guys." And Jay's like, "No, I don't." And of course, we get the introduction of Persephone, but to kind of jump ahead a little bit, we have the conversation between Bethany and Rufus and Persephone, and they're talking about Christ and the Bible and all this stuff. And we see the toilet in the strip club start to overflow. And you hear the roar. And you hear the line, "Not born shit into existence. No man of woman born. He's like, it's the Golgothan. The what? A shit demon. She's like, and Bethany's like, where the hell did that come from? And Persephone explains, you know, all the people that died at Golgotha. She's like, yeah, the skull place where Christ was crucified. She's like, yeah, well, except for him, everybody else was thieves, murderers, brigands, the worst of the worst. And she's like, explaining when somebody's crucified, they lose control of they shit themselves. And Satan, in all his hideous, ugly, disgusting wisdom, decided to create a shit demon. Now, fun fact, for those of you that may not know this, there is actually a deleted scene. It's when Bethany gets to the hospital where the shit demon shows up again. But Kevin Smith, in his wisdom, decided you never show a shit demon twice. You only show it once. And he was right. But a more hideous, disgusting, vile creation have I never seen in my entire life. And I watched The Rise of Skywalker. Than the Golgothan shit demon. To me is just, it bends. It's absurd, it's horrific, it's humorous, it's frightening. And what kills it? Air freshener. A demon smited by air freshener. Of course, the other demon in this movie, Azrael, is smited by a holy golf club. And Bethany is able to bless water, and she's like, remind me, after they kill Azrael and the three undead roller hockey boys, she's like, remind me to try that turning water to wine at my next party. Not exactly Christ's intention, Bethany, but okay, you do you. But of course, we get to the big battle at the end, and you've got Bartleby and Loki finally making it to St. Michael's Church, and they're going on a rampage. And Bartleby goes on this absolute rant, chastising the Cardinal and everybody around. And how can I have forgotten this scene? I can't believe I forgot the boardroom scene. The boardroom scene. The movie boardroom scene with Bartleby and Loki. I can't believe I almost forgot that scene, because that scene right there is absolutely hysterical. And Bartleby's like, you have done this and this and this and this, and you have raised an idol that draws worship away from the Lord. He's like, am I forgetting anything? And the chairman of the board's like, yeah, you forgot Movie Magazine. And Bartleby's like, damn it. And Loki's like, I can't believe you forgot the magazine. And he's carved the onion into a little voodoo doll. He's like, do you know much about voodoo? Not so much a religion per se, but an arrangement of superstitions. The chief of being the voodoo doll. He's like, you know, if I believed in this, he's like, I wonder. And he smashes the little onion voodoo doll. But Bartleby just goes on an absolute rant and tear. Jeff, yes, he did. He had all the goods on those board members. One disowned his gay son. One put his mother, and that's the one I hate the most, put his mother in a substandard nursing home, sold her home, and used the proceeds to buy himself an Oriental rug. One okayed the production of movie toys with materials that were unsafe because it was more cost effective. One of the guys flew to Thailand on the company dime to have sex with a 13-year-old boy. And then there was the one lone soul, the one woman amongst that whole board who was a decent human being. But her only crime, her only sin was not saying God bless you when Loki sneezed. And Bartleby's like, dude, no. But after Loki leaves, after smashing the little onion voodoo doll, and he's like, but I do believe in this. And he pulls out that big freaking gun. And can we just talk about Jeff Anderson, aka Randall Graves, as the gun shop owner? He's like, we call this one the fecalator. One look at any person, craps him or herself. And Bartleby and Loki are, Loki's like, it's not as near impressive as a flame. It's more compact than a flaming sword, but it doesn't have that intimidation factor. And Bartleby's like, well, why don't you just lay the place to waste like? And he's like, do you have any idea how hard it? Loki's like, do you have any idea how hard it is to rain down sulfur and fire and brimstone? It's one of the most taxing things a person can do aside from playing soccer. I don't really care for soccer as a sport, but it teaches them. But that whole scene where and the opening scene, okay, with Bartleby and Loki at the airport, and Loki is talking to the nun, and he convinces her to leave the church to take the money she's been collecting for her parish and to go out and get herself made up. And Bartleby's like, let me get this straight. Let's clarify a few things. You know God exists. He's spoken to you personally, and yet I heard you just claim to be an atheist. And Loki's like, I just love to F with the clergy. I just love to keep those guys on their toes. And as they're walking through the airport, we see that same nun in a bar smoking and drinking. And that brings me to another interesting deleted scene from this movie. It's a conversation between Rufus and Bethany. I found, this scene I had some issue with, but I'll let it slide. It's the whole conversation about how Bartleby and Loki had this unknown ability to have their way with women. I don't want to put it that way. They were able to get angels were essentially able to get laid. Essentially. Now that I had a bit of an issue with, but yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna just pass that. That one. That's a little too far even for me. Angels having sex when they don't even have genitalia. That doesn't work. Of course, when Metatron shows up in Bethany's apartment, she's like, "Please, just don't kill or rape me, assault me." And he's like, "You bottom feeders in your arrogance, thinking everybody's just trying to get into your knickers. I couldn't assault you if I wanted to. Angels are ill-equipped." And then he pulls his pants down, and of course, there's nothing there. He's like, "See, I'm as anatomically incapacitated as a Ken doll." And I just got to say this about Alan Rinkman in this movie. You, sir, were awesome in this movie. Alan Rinkman as Metatron. I am a seraphim, the highest choir of angels. And then when they're in the Mexican restaurant, and he brings up the 10th plague, and she's like, the 10th plague. He's like, tell someone you're the Metatron. They stare at you blankly, reference something from a Charlton Heston movie, and everybody's a theology scholar. Can I continue interrupted, please? And Bethany's like, okay, sorry. And poor Metatron, he just can't keep his clothes clean. He's like, did you have to use the whole can? Do you spray every person that comes into your bedroom? No wonder you're single. The dialogue that Kevin Smith wrote for Alan Rickman in this movie is, yes, Jeff, there's only one movie where he's, I think, just as funny, and that's Galaxy Quest as Dr. Lazarus, Alexander Dane. Rinkman in Dogma and in Galaxy Quest, two of his funniest roles ever. Absolute funniest. And here's the fun fact for those of you that probably know this. What's one of Alan Rinkman's best known roles? I know it's not Severus Snape, although I will acknowledge his role as Severus Snape in the Harry Potter. Hans Gruber in Heart. But in Dogma and Quest, Alan Rinkman is absolute true. He is hilarious. And it's only a shame he only worked on one of Kevin Smith's movies, but for this one movie, he was hysterical, absolutely hysterical and thoughtful and British and wonderful and awesome. And we miss Alan Rinkman. And Alan, we miss you so very much. I mean, for me, okay, let me say this: of the standout performances in this movie, and there are many, Alan Rinkman's is right up there. If I had to say who had the best performance in this movie, ooh, mm. This is difficult because I think everybody's performance in this movie was just great. I can't. And now, if I had to say my favorite performance, who had the best lines, the most memorable lines, all of that, I'm going to have to say Chris Rock. But for me, it's everybody. Everybody does a great job in this movie. But Chris Rock as Rufus, he killed me. Yeah, Jeff B., I did know that because he didn't know that he was going to be falling out of a window. But I have to say, everybody's performance, Linda Ferrantino, Jason Mewes, Kevin Smith, George Carlin, Alan Rinkman, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Linda Ferrantino, all of them are hysterical, but Chris Rock as Rufus, he has to be by far my favorite performance in this movie. I love him as Rufus. Rufus the rabble rouser who wants to be, who thinks that he should be back in the Bible, and maybe he should be. Maybe he should be. Maybe we should have the gospel according to Rufus. Be pretty interesting. I wouldn't lie. Of course, he refers to, he's like, I could have been knee deep in shepherd's dust. I was in my prime. Okay, that sounded a little too much like Chris Rock, and I did not mean to do that. But it's, this movie, this to put this on a list, my own personal list, Dogma is in my top 20. Most definitely in my top 20. Maybe even my top 10. Because it is just that good. Now, as I've kind of talked about in this review, do some of the things that Kevin Smith, some of the ideas he put in there, are they controversial? No. Are they thought provoking? Yes. I do most sincerely believe that. But, and as I said, as one of my professors in seminary said, if you're not being a little bit heretical and working out your faith, you're not trying. And I think there's truth in that. So was Kevin Smith being a bit heretical? Yeah. But was he doing it to be mean-spirited or hateful? No. Was he trying to tell a good story? Yeah, and I think he told a very good story in this movie. I mean, it goes without saying, as I just said, this is by far one of my all-time favorite movies. It is in my top 10, at the very least. And that's rarefied country and everything for my all-time favorite movies. But to kind of start to wrap this up, to say I love this movie is an understatement. Because Kevin Smith created a film that may have at the time been controversial, and I still can't get why I understand that all the View Askew films were done by different studios. This one was done by Columbia TriStar, I think it was. The other films that he did were released by other studios, so that could be why the films haven't been transferred to Blu-ray. I don't know. I don't know if Smith has himself the rights to these films. I'm not sure. But if you can find a copy, or if you do have a copy of this film, either the regular theatrical edition or the special edition that has all the extras to it, do not take a lesson from me. Do not trade this movie in. Do not sell it. Unless you absolutely have to. Because it is funny. It is thought-provoking. It is a bit heretical, but it is in the best possible way. I wasn't aware of that, Ronnie. My mom was once had to sign a petition against this movie in the church parking lot. She said, she was like, free speech. Yes. Here's the thing, and I've discussed this throughout this stream today. Can I understand why people might be offended by some of the ideas that Kevin Smith presents in this film? Sure, I can understand that. But to have this movie censored or not released or whatever the case may be because it presents some ideas that are heretical or might be perceived as blasphemous. Look, if you're, I'm going to say this, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a few minutes here. So bear with me. If a movie alone, one little movie alone, all by its lonesome, can shake your faith, can make you doubt your faith, can make you question your faith, particularly your Christian faith, then you really need to take a harder look inside yourself and consider where your faith is rooted. Now, as I said earlier on in this review, did I initially have an issue with some of the ideas that Kevin Smith put forth in this film? Yes, I did. But you know what? I went into this movie open-minded. I went into this movie with, and here's the thing. When I watched this movie at the time, I wasn't even going to church. I was by no means what you would regard as a devout Christian. Now, have I always believed in God? Have I always believed in Christ? Do I believe that the Bible is the word of God given to humanity? Yes, I do. I always believed those things. But I will say this: if one movie put out by one guy is going to make you question your faith or challenge your faith, then you do need to have your faith challenged. You need to really take a good, hard, deep look at your Christian faith, and you really need to do some serious introspection. You need to look deep inside yourself, and you need to ask yourself this question: where is my faith rooted? And how strong is my faith? Because for something as trivial and inconsequential as a movie, Though this movie does, I think, very effectively make people should make people take a hard look at themselves in in their beliefs, particularly their Christian beliefs, whether you're Protestant or Catholic, either way. And I will say this: if it makes you think about where your belief stands, what your beliefs are rooted in, then it did its job. Yeah, and Jeff, I'll bring up your comment here, and to everybody else in the chat, don't think that I've been disregarding your comments or anything if I haven't brought them up, but I don't do it out of disrespect. I hope you all know this, but I'll bring up your comment here, Jeff. Seems the best movies test limits. Dogma, Doctor Strangelove, Blazing Saddles, etc. You've got to have a sense of humor. Yes, you do. To get through life, you need two things. At least from my perspective, you need two things. You need a good sense of humor, and you need to have a good, solid, strong faith. Whether that's Christianity, whether it's Protestant or Catholic, whether it is of one of the Eastern religions, whatever the case may be. Those are the things that keep us going. Those are the things that give us the drive and the push to keep going in life when you feel like you cannot go another step further. It's the ability to laugh and the ability to believe in something bigger than yourself that keeps us human beings. And I will say this to Kevin Smith, particularly in reference to Dogma. He might be ashamed of this movie, but he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be. Because Kevin, if I refer to you on a first name basis, Kevin, you didn't do anything wrong when you made this movie. You didn't do anything wrong when you made Dogma. You poured your talent and your time and your blood and your sweat and your tears into the script, into your ability as a director to get this movie made. And there's no shame in that. Because as you said yourself, even the Almighty has a sense of humor. And this movie and your God given talents are a testament to that. Not to mention, you had one of the most absurd ideas for any movie in the history of cinema with the shit demon. Well, anyways, folks, that's going to be the review for this afternoon. I thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this, whether you're here live or you catch us on the replay. And of course, leave your thoughts down below, regardless of what they may be, on Dogma. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think it's heretical? Do you think it's blasphemous? Do you think it's the most horrendous thing Kevin Smith has ever done? Or did you love it? Did it challenge you? Did it make you think? Well, speaking for myself, it did all the above. So I do want to let you all know I will be back this evening, 8:30 Central Time, with my review of course, something a little bit lighter, something a little more goofy, a little more silly. Dance on the Bob Strike Back. So make sure you hit your notifications. And of course, I will have the link to the screen in the chat if you want to join me for that review. And you'll have a great day. And I don't rarely say this, but God bless you. I will see you tonight. Stay ambassadorial. And this is the ambassador. Sign off.